Hello, everybody. Welcome to UGA Sports Live. My name is Radi Nabulsi. I am joined by our managing editor, Anthony Dasher, and our executive producer, the new title credits there for Dayne Young. We're having Dash on. Coach Johnny can't be with us today. Has feeling a little bit under the weather, so we're a little bit late. But it's because we're trying to get our man Anthony Dasher on. He has been front and center at leading the coverage at UGASports.com of Georgia's baseball team. And I know that people come on the show and they want to talk football. And we do talk football. Sometimes we talk recruiting, and we talk a lot of coaches' insights that you just can't get anywhere else. But you also can't get coverage like Anthony Dasher has been delivering. Dash was actually covering the baseball team back in the fall. Nobody else covers fall ball, but Dash goes and covers it. And he was telling us back then, first year under Wes Johnson, he goes, this team could be really good. Okay, well, Dash, you've covered a lot of teams before, and they've started out good, and then you get into the SEC play, and SEC play is just vicious. The Bulldogs make it to the first they host the regionals. Now they're hosting the super regionals. They made it with a most dramatic victory I've seen in years over Georgia Tech. So let's get your overall thoughts on Georgia hosting NC State and what the hell's going on with this crazy baseball team.
Yeah, I mean, so many angles to cover with this. I think throwing all that all only there at one time. No, first about the game itself. On what was it, Sunday? I'm losing. I can't keep up with my days anymore. Everything kind of runs together. But that was one of the more exciting games I think I've seen at Foley Field. I mean, realizing I wrote about this. Going back to the 2001 regional when Jeff Keppinger hit 3 home runs to beat, I believe, Coastal Carolina, had 2-run homer in the ninth to win the game. It's just a crazy atmosphere. It reminded me of a football game. I hate to, bring football to every conversation, but just the craziness, the way fans were into it was was pretty fun to watch. I mean, if you weren't a baseball fan, to see all the energy and excitement going on, for Georgia baseball was pretty cool to see. But this is a team, again, as I told you a long time ago, I thought this team could hit. You got Charlie Condon coming back for another year, and what he's done this year has just been. I've run out of words to try to describe the season that young man.
Brock Bowers-esque.
Brock, I mean, in fact, I think I was asked on Twitter. I mean, kind of explain Charlie a little bit. It was Keith Marshall actually asked on Twitter, and I said, and that's how I responded. He's the Brock Bowers of Georgia baseball. If you want to get an idea of how much this guy means to a program, what he does, that's probably the best, most recent, comparison I can probably make. But we could sit here and talk about Charlie Condon probably for the next hour. But again, you look up and down at what this team has done. It hasn't been Charlie. I mean, Corey Collins was put in a leadoff role back in March when they played Wofford, and here's Corey. He's like 6'3", about 235 pounds. Does not look like you're a prototypical leadoff hitter. But all he does is get on base. And when you're on base in front of Charlie Condon, that's a 2-run home run, waiting to happen. And Corey's been hit by pitches 27 times this year, which is, if you're old school like me, you go back to Don Baylor when he was with the Angels and Red Sox, would always used to get hit by pitches. This kind of reminds me, what you're seeing with Corey. But up and down the lineup, though, the addition that Wes Johnson made, hit into transfer portal, bringing guys like Dylan Carter, Dylan Goldstein. I mean, just up and down, Alford, third baseman from Mississippi State, Slate. It's just been a remarkable job he's done putting this team together, and then we're seeing the fruits of that labor right now. Now, the pitching was always going to be a little bit of a question mark. I wasn't sure how they're going to, handle that. I mean, SEC is such a tough league when it comes to offense, but the pitchers, there have been some ups and downs, but they've made it this far. And even though you might look at the stats and kind of scratch your head at kind of how are they doing it, I mean, West just has a way of getting the best out of these guys. And even though, again, there were some bumps in the road over this past weekend in the regional, they did just enough to allow this offense to kind of take control. And that's kind of been the story for this team. Pitching has been just good enough, but the bats have really been what's carried this team so far.
I remember your second column of the season about baseball, and you wrote about this team not quitting.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, when I first read it, I'm like, he's got a point, because you just come through. Remember, they got swept by Kentucky right off the bat in the first SEC series, and everyone's like, God bless America, this is terrible, because they've done so well leading up to SEC play, and then all of a sudden, they started beating some good teams, and you're like, look, I'm just telling you, folks, I've covered a lot of baseball, and you can tell when a team kind of checks out. Okay, they're down 5 runs. They're just going to live to play another day. And you wrote, this team just won't quit. Your latest column was talking about how they believe. And Wes Johnson came in and said, you got to believe in it. And I'm not trying to get into all Ted Lasso about it, but it was just a situation where the faith this team has to get around some sketchy pitching. The pitching's not been great, but those guys are like, look, we get our bats. We're coming back up there. And I think nothing says belief and power and just optimism like that Georgia Tech game where, they had to come back and win in extra innings. And I mean, you mentioned Slade Alford. I'm thinking Trey Phelps and the stuff that he's done. Trey's, like you said, he's the next superstar on this team. He's going to be a monster. That you can never count them out. And there are a couple of times I'm like, okay, well, even after they lost 2 out of 3 to Florida at the end of the season, you're like, okay, well, they're not going to host a super regional. They're going to host, but not that. They get a 7 seed, and now they're hosting NC State. The confidence going into the regional was huge. But just reading your report on this morning about, who the teams that NC State has faced, and, the teams that Georgia's faced in that, the shared opponents. You got to, and it being at home, that atmosphere, you got to like Georgia's chances. Again, it's tough. NC State's no pushover, but man, you got to like how this is lining up.
NC State is playing very good baseball right now. In fact, both Georgia and NC State are 11-3 over the past 14 games. I mean, it's going to be they're legit. They're a legit program. I mean, they're going to give Georgia all it can handle. But you mentioned the home record of Georgia. The Bulldogs are 32-5 at Foley Field this year.
That's nuts.
North Carolina State is 6-13 on the road in true road games this year. Of course, a lot of that I think you can throw out the window, being what all's at stake right now. A trip to the College World Series, but Georgia has to feel good about a chance at playing in a place where they have just swung the bats exceptionally well. They're playing at noon. You get in Foley Field on a hot summer day. The ball is going to carry regardless, but you're looking at a quite possibly the wind blowing out. Noon first pitch. There could be a lot of offense coming up.
Dash, with Wes Johnson, by every metric, this team has overperformed expectations.
Sure.
He may be even talent on the roster as a whole beyond Condon for sure, who will be a top 5 pick, maybe the number 1 overall pick, depends on who you talk to. What is it that Wes Johnson has done so well to get this result?
I go back to that word belief. There's a video that I think Georgia Dogs put up. It might have been one of his first meetings he had with the team. He talked about that belief and how this team and how he told the players to don't put any limitation. Don't let people tell you what you're going to do, how they think you're going to perform. Just go ahead and believe in yourself. In baseball, belief. I've talked to several coaches, many coaches over the years about this. Belief is as much as 90% part of the deal. Baseball is such a mental game. You have to be a good athlete to hit a round ball, a round bat, but it's that belief and be able to continuously do that, I think, sets teams apart. And that's why I think you've seen Georgia, again, have success, even though you've had some players. Again, you look at the numbers. I'll give you a great example. Daniel Pattysack, his ERA has been about 7.5 all year long. What does he do against Georgia Tech? Comes in, those two scoreless innings. And, helps Georgia, bridge that gap to the ninth, where they're tied a game with that Kobe Branch home run to lead off. It's just that belief. It doesn't matter what your numbers are. If he believes in you, he tells them that on a daily basis. When they go out, they can flush whatever, bad performance they may have had and go out and are able to put the best foot forward in that next time they're at the plate or on the mound. And I think that's what's really made a difference, just that confidence that he continues to push. And he does not get down on a single player. It's always positivity. And I think that's what ultimately has it paying off for the Bulldogs right now.
Talk real quick about the 9-hole hitter. You're talking about confidence.
Yeah, Kobe Branch. I don't see how many 9-hole hitters there are in college baseball with 17 home runs. In fact, I believe it was the Coastal Carolina coach who or no, it was the Army coach. I'm sorry, who talked about Kobe being that 9-hole and just kind of joking. That's unfair. It's fair for Georgia, but it's not fair for everybody else to bring a guy in, who has got that kind of power. And Kobe has 4 Grand Slams this year, individual school record. Georgia has hit 12 Grand Slams as a team, team record for that deal there. And just he just done a great job. They moved him down. I guess it had been about a month ago, and he's excelled. I mean, you're basically hitting in front of Corey Collins and Charlie Condon, so you're going to get some good pitches to hit. And when he does, he's been taking advantage of it for the most part.
And that was kind of cracked me up is when you put out the stat the other day, I'm like, yeah, Georgia's 9-hole hitter has 4 Grand Slams. I'm like, that's not fair. That's not fair to anybody. But Wes Johnson's done an amazing job with the team, and just can't talk enough about how I remember earlier in the season, and he's like every other coach. He's not going to say, hey, we need to look ahead. We got, he will say we got to take one game at a time. But he was talking to them early on about, hey, if we win, let's win this series and let's win that series, and then we have a chance to host. He was kind of looking ahead. So, to your point about belief, he's like, guys, if you will do what I ask you and you will buy in, here's where we can go. And I don't think anybody had them pegged for it. It's been 16 years since Georgia made a super regional. Who the hell thought they were going to get that far?
They were picked 6 in the SEC East to start the season. I mean, this was a team where there was no expectation on him whatsoever to start the year.
Can we put this team in some Georgia context, Dash? So I know you said that the hitting this year has been more consistent. Pitching has been more of an adventure. And I feel like that's different than kind of the latter years of the Strickland era, even 2020, which was probably Georgia's best team in recent years, but then didn't get to play it out with COVID with Emerson Hancock, Cole Wilcox. Is this team better than that one? Or do we have to go back to Gordon Beckham to find something?
I think probably go back to Gordon Beckham. And I offensively, I think this team was better than the 20 team, but the pitching, you mentioned that. Now, I think when you talk about Emerson Hancock, Cole Wilcox, and Ryan Webb too, I think is on his way up the ladder in Cleveland's organization right now. That team has some pitching. And if you put that pitching with this team right now, I think you go and put Georgia as World Series champs this season. But that's not going, not the case. We put out the arms again. The arms they've got. Leighton Finley has shown he's a battler. Colton Smith is a guy who's come on from about the latter third, from the first third of the season up until right now, has been pretty consistent. But it's been a patchwork deal for Coach Johnson with these guys. I mean, guys are some good arms. Don't get me wrong, man. You've got guys who with good velo will throw 93, 94, 95 miles per hour, but a lot of inexperience, to start the year, and other guys who have had their ups and downs, but they've got it done so far.
I mean, they're going to need somebody, Dash, to pitch a gym at some point during whatever run this is. I think of that championship game against Fresno State, and it didn't matter how good Georgia's lineup was; it wasn't doing anything that day.
And that's the fun thing. Again, I'm jumping ahead. If they make the College World Series, and you see this every year with every team that's in there, you see somebody step up. You mentioned some pitcher kind of coming out of the woodwork, and you'll probably need to see that from Georgia if they are to get the World Series first, and then second, you want that to make a run. Somebody will have to do that. Could it be a guy like Zach Harris, who give him a lot of credit for what he did against Georgia Tech? Gave up 5 runs the first 2 innings, but then 4 scoreless after that. Got him through 6. Was able to give it to the bullpen, which held the Yellow Jackets out from there.
Yeah, I was going to mention Harris. The best part about the season, of course, was beating Georgia Tech in extra innings. Them getting their hopes up and knocking it down. And we have, I know it's too small for most people to see on the screen, but we have some jacket tiers. There's a whole thread on the board from our buddy Dog in Dosta. Dog Doc in Dosta, and just the tears from the Georgia Tech fans are pretty hilarious. There's nothing like watching the Schadenfreude of other teams losing their minds. And if you're going to go from the regional to the super regional and host, it helps to beat your arch rival. And again, this is from a team that canceled a game against Georgia earlier on that Georgia was winning. So a lot of Georgia fans feel very, very vindicated that. Well, Radi, we're going to talk football. We're going to switch gears here. Well, Ashes will stick with us.
I do want to mention, Radi, just as a whole for Georgia athletics, kind of what this means. Because I was thinking about this. We all kind of remarked in our group chat about Arkansas's quick exit from the baseball postseason, right? And if you look, Arkansas basketball, baseball, like most of the Arkansas programs have taken a dip in the last 2 years, and this happens. Georgia's had some years that its other sports weren't as great either, but baseball's coming along. I think there's some positive momentum with Mike White. Women's basketball just had its worst year in a long, long time, but tennis is fantastic. So I think as a whole, Josh Brooks has made some pretty great hires at Georgia in recent years.
Yeah, I mean, look at volleyball, soccer. They're good. Women's. This was why I mentioned this on the show last night. My Munsonism kicked in, and you guys were in the same group chat, and I mentioned I could just see Georgia losing 2 games in a row to Georgia Tech simply because they had dominated them in their regular season, and that's how I felt about women's tennis. They beat Texas A&M multiple times, played them for the national title, and lose 4-1. It's like just sometimes it just doesn't work out. So the fact that Georgia had to beat them in extra innings, I was like, I told y'all this is going to be tighter than we expected. Anyway, but yes, the women's softball, heck of a season. Baseball on the come up. Major year one. And here's the thing: if you go see Arkansas's facilities, they are nuts. They are far and above what Georgia has. That's it's unreal. So they put money in it, and it's paid off for them. But yeah, you can have it, and it's cyclical. There are times where it seems like Florida's winning everything, but Auburn's doing really well. So right now, though, I think Josh Brooks, he just got a raise, and it's for good reason. So anyway, speaking of good things, I want to mention our friends over at Your Pie. They have a good thing now that you probably haven't seen before. I know a lot of you have tried Your Pie. It's a fantastic pizza joint. You go in and you tell them what sort of pizza you want, the crust, the sauce, the cheese, all the toppings. They pop it in their super hot brick oven. By the time you've paid for it, got your drink, sat down, they bring it to the table, and it's phenomenal. But they have a new, to most people, menu item. They have wings. They have the classic buffalo wings. They have the lemon pepper Parmesan wings. Those are incredible. They have their hot honey barbecue wings. You got to try those if you like hot. If you like a little bit of sweet. You like chicken wings, you're going to love the hot honey barbecue. And of course, they have their plain roasted wings if you don't want any flavorings on them, other than just the really good chicken. They're roasted to perfection in the brick ovens. You're absolutely going to love it. So check out our friends at Your Pie. Today is Tuesday. You get double points on the Your Pie app. So download the Your Pie app, order your pizza, your wings, your salads, your sandwiches, your gelato, your drinks, whatever. Go pick it up or eat in store. You can actually still do it on the app and eat it there. And you will be very, very happy because very quickly you will start amassing free gifts from Your Pie. So hit them up when you get a chance. Also want to mention our friends at Athens Ford. I noticed that right now they have receive an additional $500 towards your trade. So if you're going to take a trade in right now, they're giving you an extra $500. So it's pretty awesome to say, hey, what's my best deal on the trade in? And then add $500 to it. They need your trades. They've got 850 vehicles on the lot. They, of course, have their June specials just started up. June is always a big month in the car sale industry. So they got some really good deals out there. You need to check out our friends at Athens Ford. They are huge supporters of the University of Georgia. You won't find anybody in Athens who does more to try to help out the university, help out the Bulldogs. And Brian and the folks out there at Athens Ford will do the same for you. So help the folks who help out your university. Right.
Transfer rule time?
Yeah, let's transfer.
I wanted to get y'all's take on this because in recent weeks, the Justice Department decided that the NCAA trying to block transfers or mitigate transfers just isn't going to happen anymore. That's not legally viable. And so we have entered the era of unlimited transfers, and it's 2024. And I'm thinking back to 2016, the hoops that Georgia went through to get Maurice Smith able to play at Georgia. This has happened so quickly in less than a decade of it's hard to transfer, and now it is unlimited transfers from here on out. So, Radi, how do you think this is going to impact Georgia's roster? But really, it's more of what we've seen with college football, where transfer portal is another recruiting cycle twice a year.
Well, I think you're going to see people keep saying the transfer portal is going to get to be more and more. I think the new NIL rules or new ability to pay players is going to stymie the transfer portal, because now that a school can pay a player directly, it doesn't have to go through a collective. I think the school is going to say, okay, come with us and we are going to pay you for your NIL, and we are going to sign an exclusive 2-year deal. So therefore, we own your NIL rights. We're going to pay you a lot of money for it, but we own your NIL for 2 years or 3 years or 4 years, or the length of your college career. I could see that. I could see them saying, here's what you're going to make in year 1. Here's what you'll make in year 2. And I'll say maybe there's a balloon payment in year 2. It's bigger. Year 3 is even bigger than that as it goes up and as you become a bigger contributor. In other words, I could see the schools now having the financial ability to make it better for the players to not transfer. As for the unlimited, I could see a situation where a student athlete transfers, say, from Georgia to Alabama. It's like, okay, it's not working for me at Georgia. I'm going to Alabama. It doesn't work at Alabama. He's ready to transfer again, and there's no reason not to. It's like, hey, look, I can transfer. I don't have to sit out another year. I have immediate eligibility within wherever I want to go. This is great. How much does that third school want you? So, okay, you couldn't cut it at Georgia. You couldn't cut it at Alabama. Now you're coming to Mississippi State. We may need you, but I just don't. The doom and gloom that I've seen prophesized, I just don't know that'll be there, because we've already seen a ton of players who go in the portal and don't find homes. If it's your second, third, fourth transfer, academically, I don't know how you'll be eligible, but I don't know how many. I can see it trickling down. I just don't see the top players jumping from school to school to school. The ones that Georgia would want, the ones that Alabama would want, the ones that Clemson would want. I just don't see it happening.
I think there could be some situations, like an Andrew Paul comes to mind, where the injury at Georgia, not getting a ton of playing time at Georgia, down on the depth chart. He has to go down to Jacksonville State. And so if he has a great season there, he would be coveted the following year from top schools. So maybe that there's some benefit to that. But like he said, at this point, he would not be considered one of the top players, top prospects in America. But those programs like a Jacksonville State, or even smaller, FBS programs, they're just going to be poached.
Yeah, there's no question about that. I think that's a very good point when talking about, guys like Andrew Paul. I mean, I think you'll see that across the board. My biggest question, though, with all of this stuff, Radi, you're talking about, having 2-year, 3-year contracts. When do these athletes become employees of the university? I mean, that's basically, what you're talking about right now. And that's something that I know that the NCAA wants, our government officials to kind of decide for them. But I think that's a point moving forward that it's going to kind of come into play as well.
Now, it's a great point. What the I think the only purpose of the NCAA going forward no longer be rules enforcement or anything like that. It will be the window dressing on an antitrust exemption. Mm-hmm. That will be the only purpose of the NCAA, is to afford that. Now, if you look at the resolution of the House case, okay, when they basically said, okay, we have a settlement of $2.8 billion. Part of that settlement was for the plaintiffs, the ones suing the NCAA, the whole class action lawsuit, and a couple others, was, okay, now all you plaintiffs, you come in the fold, you join with us, we all go to Congress and ask them for that antitrust exemption so that we can pay you directly, but you're not employees. So they want that they want that exemption, they want that carve out, if you will, because like you said, Dash, that is, if you're paying them, aren't they employees? And it's like we have at UGA Sports and a lot of other places, when you have people that are part-time workers, that's not their full-time job, then they're contractors, they're 1099 guys. I could definitely see a situation where there's, the National Labor Relations Safety Board says, they're contractors, but if you look at the amount of hours a football player, a tennis player, a swimmer puts in at the university, at any university, it's going to be hard to say they're contractors. You know, it's going to be hard to make them a 1099 because their job is school, but their real job or where they spend all their hours is in the pool or on the tennis courts, you know, at the track, you know, on the football field, at the basketball gym. I'm with you, Dash. That's where it gets to. Point, and if they make an employee, can you fire them?
Well, there's that, but then do you have to pay benefits, and do they get into the teachers' retirement system like most state employees at universities do? And coaches are a part of that as well. So the precedent is there where players, that's going to be a hard one to reckon with. I think the relationship, Radi, the next reckoning, because the first one has been, do you pay players because there's so much money that all of this generates and players weren't getting a share of that. The next is, what is the relationship to a university with academics? Because if they become employees, like I just finished my master's, that was a choice that I made, that I got it tuition free because I'm a university employee. Would players at that point not be required to do the academic piece of it, but then have the option to do it as an employee and get it for free if they want? So essentially, the relationship between athletics and academics, I think, is the next thing that could change.
I guess, Bart, but you did. That's a question for people much smarter than me, which is about 98% of the population. But I will say the other thing that might cut down on the transfer portal is this ability to pay players, because at some point when you sign them to their deals, you can put in a buyout. So, hey, you want to transfer, you know, Andrew Paul, you want to transfer to Auburn? Okay. Jacksonville State has, you know, a $300,000 buyout that Auburn has to pay. And I can see some schools going, ooh, we like that kid, but we don't like him $300,000 worth. So,
well, and if they're employees, when they sign us out of high school, you could say we're signing to a 3-year deal, and you have to hold that up.
Yeah, that's my point, is be the NIL deal or the contract. In other words, there are an army of lawyers who are saying, okay, now that the die is cast, the schools can't pay it. They could pay $20 million. All right, we're going to make this the best scenario for the university, you know, for that. So, and on the flip side, there's a ton of lawyers out there advocating for the players. We need to get Keith Marshall on here. I really want to talk about how he sees all this playing out, because the first thing we heard was, well, that's the end of the collectives. And the head of the collectives association goes, the hell you say? We're in it deeper now than ever, because now all of a sudden the schools are involved and they can pay it, and they're just not going to hand it over to their employee, the benefits department. Like you said, they're not employees yet, so they need somebody. So now we'll see the collectives and the schools working more hand in hand. I could definitely see some buyouts there, and the contracts and, you know, show cause and all sorts of fun stuff. It's going to be wild.
When I first started at UGA Sports, I used to have, and I would say this out loud on our board or on these shows, of my pipe dream was that in college football specifically, but really all of college athletics, that we would have promotion and relegation like you have in soccer around the world. And it sounded absurd, and everyone said that sounds absurd. That's never going to happen. And it still probably isn't. But there's a window to get crazy things like, but Stanford's in the ACC. Like no one is really caring about the best interest of players anymore. Like this is, how can these enterprises make the most money possible? That's it. And if sometimes some TV executive says promotion and relegation will make us this amount of money on these games and weren't going to be played, then all of a sudden we're going to have promotion and relegation.
Speaking of, if you're Stanford baseball or Stanford, I've covered a lot of Stanford tennis throughout the years. That's if you're Stanford baseball and you've got a weekend series at Wake Forest. How many days of class do you miss? I'm not thinking, you're not flying out Thursday morning.
At least 3.
Or it's gonna be Friday morning, yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, and that would be for baseball.
You find out on Wednesday.
Baseball would have that for the weekend, but what about volleyball teams that play on Thursday and have to cross the country?
Yeah, it's just not so. Yeah. Again, that's getting far afield. But to your point, the whole thing of we got to do what's best for the student athlete. No, the conferences. And again, I'm not trying to come out and rip the NCAA, but fact that they allowed a lot of that stuff to happen just shows.
Well, their next argument is if we make more money, that's what's best for the athlete because then they make more money.
Yeah, well, if you all of a sudden they get paid. I want to jump to the spring meetings. You were in Destin. I know a lot of reporters were talking about the spring meetings. They weren't there. You were actually there. You were talking to these people firsthand. You had a lot more information. I want you to kind of, if you would, speaking of some of the other sports and football, there was a big talk about elimination of walk-ons because, as Dayne was saying, now do you need, if they're all employees, do you need to even give them a scholarship because they could just take classes pro bono, for free because now they are employees of the university. They were talking about getting rid of scholarship limits. You can have as many scholarships as you want, but we're going to have a roster cap. The back and forth on that, a lot of people don't understand. Why would you have a roster cap? Why would you have a scholarship cap? What's going on there? Kind of, if you would, explain what the hell's going on.
Well, we'll start with the roster cap, which I think was the biggest point of consternation with all the coaches who were there. There are no coaches at the spring meetings who were in favor of a roster cap because, number one, you start limiting roster to 85 players, man, that really cuts into how you prepare each week. Kirby Smart, I guarantee you, is not a fan of this. Now, George has 110, 115, 120 players. We go out to practice and we see 4 different groups practicing at one time. You can't do that without walk-on players. They would greatly affect, I think, the way coach and really all schools in the SEC about going about preparing for games, on a weekly basis. But the reason this subject's been brought up again with a roster cap, with the settlement between the NCAA and over the House lawsuit, and plus then you add the fact that now with players can be paid, the age school is expected to be able to have to pay about $20 million approximately to cover all that. So how do you cover it? You cut some of your costs, and the way to cut some of the costs is limit your rosters, and that's kind of what it's come down to. I personally, people I talk to, I don't think it'll be anything as drastic as cutting down for football, for example, for an 85 limit. I think you'll probably see maybe 105, 110 maybe if they can squeeze that out. But that is definitely an issue that was kind of front and center, the roster cap and how schools would deal with, how football teams would deal with that if it came into play. But again, I'll be thoroughly surprised if we wake up one morning and they've decided and voted to cut it to 85 players.
It'd be quite an optics issue because if you're asking these teams to play more and more games with fewer players.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a great point.
Exactly. Another thing that's kind of come up too, of all the subjects that was discussed, I think the one thing you will see pretty soon is start having an injury report in the SEC, kind of similar to what they happen in the NFL. One thing that Greg Sankey, talked a lot about, the concern over gambling and information that gets out there. And that's something that I think they're kind of close to maybe putting that into play. Now, guys, y'all know how we deal with injuries with Kirby Smart and all SEC coaches. That's probably the last thing I like to talk about. But in conversations, at least on the record, even from Coach Smart, he said he would have no problem, having some kind of injury report as long as everybody else was doing it. So that's something I think you could see, maybe moving forward something similar to what the NFL does now. How forthcoming all these schools would be, I guess that's another subject. But still, to have something in place, I think would be a good thing.
Be a lot of game time decisions.
Yeah, I know. Just like if you play college fantasy football, man, you'd be making those moves in and out based on what you see from those reports.
How much you want to bet that Kirby Smart lists like 85 players?
Yeah. Well, we see that with the on the depth chart roster we get the game in our game notes. We see either or on as far as who may start at either a specific position. So you may see a lot of that too.
Yeah, it has to turn it a depth chart, and they're like, okay, well, here's your depth chart.
Mm-hmm.
Either or.
Yeah.
Kirby Smart is fantastic at giving us updates when we can, when we get him. Kirby will tell you, hey, what do you think about this? If you ask him a good question, he'll give you a good answer.
Yeah,
if you ask him a stupid question, you're going to get roasted. And I've got no problem with that. I've been roasted plenty of times. Although a couple of times I think he misunderstood my question, but that's fine. The only problems I've ever had with a Kirby Smart press conference is when I'm asking about an injured player and I like know what the injury is. And he's like, we hope to get him back this week. And that is not a lie. He hopes to get him back. He knows he won't. But in a perfect world, that Liz Frank foot injury would heal this week. He only broke it last week, and I'd love to get him back this week. Yeah, I know that's not the answer. So watching Kirby have to give away stuff like that, he goes to great lengths to keep other teams guessing. So
I don't blame him for him. That's that little in game that coaches play every week with schools. And so again, I'm curious to tell how an injury report would maybe keep some of that from happening. I'm not sure if it would or not.
Well, in the pros, it has in the parentheses like the body part that is injured, knee, elbow, whatever. All of Georgia's are going to be a little banged up.
Yeah.
No. Lower body injury, upper body injury.
Yeah.
Well, his wrist is broken.
Arm, leg, foot.
Upper body injury. His ankle is snapped in half.
Anything below the waist is a lower body injury. Everything above the waist is an upper body injury.
I do. And here's the thing. There are a lot of players who don't want this to come out. Players try to hide injuries too.
Oh, sure.
Mainly to not impact their NFL draft status. So that people say, they need to come out because the gamblers need it, blah, blah, blah. And there are a lot of people who love the fact that it doesn't come out. They get some inside information and they bet accordingly. Man, we could have made a killing on some of the stuff that we've known over the years, but we don't do it to be unethical. But there are a lot of players who don't put me on that list, coach, because I don't want anybody to know. And when they go to the NFL draft, they get, I won't say raked over the coals, but they are gone over with a fine tooth comb to find any past injuries. I mean, even stuff going back to high school. So,
even look at Amarius Mims, the comment that Nick Saban made about him on draft day. That was a football expert in Nick Saban making an accusation that Mims was not going to play through whatever injury. And he didn't even have the information on that. Yeah. So there's so many narratives and things that people can think that aren't accurate when they don't know for sure.
Yeah. I want to jump back real quick before we go to the next break, and then we'll do some questions after that. The roster limits versus the scholarship stuff. One of the things I was told was now that you can just pay the players, you can put just about everybody on scholarships. So, Dash, how many? You got 32 baseball players. How many scholarships are they sharing? 11 and a half.
Right now it's 11.7, but with what you're talking about, all players will be able to get a scholarship. So for some sports like baseball, you'll be benefits, great benefits, and that's something I've been screaming from the mountaintops. Me and Ron Polk have been screaming from the mountaintops for forever. It's been totally unfair for baseball to be limited, in the way they have, scholarship wise. So from that standpoint, I think it's a great thing. I'd be thrilled for any baseball player to get a full ride to Georgia or any other school for that matter.
Baseball will get better. Men's tennis will get better. Men's swimming will get better. Men's track will get better. I mean, because if you can start adding those guys to scholarships, you start doing some amazing stuff. The reason I was told that they were looking at roster caps maybe across the board, because as you said, once you start paying out $20 million, you got to cut some places. Mm-hmm. Is the next case, the next legal issue that could come up was, why does the NCAA limit scholarship opportunities? And the NCAA is what, 0-8 in the courts right now. So I could see people saying, look, it's not fair for you to limit the scholarships.
And don't forget, they got to figure out how Title IX is going to play all into this too. So that's another.
Next word's right on my mouth. So you can expand it, but then you have to spend it the other side. So
yeah.
But I could also see a situation where Title IX is the biggest question mark out there, because now, what if you make them all employees? Does Title IX still apply? Because there's no mandate saying you have to hire the same number. You just have to have the same number of opportunities. So it gets really, again, that army of lawyers, man, everybody's got a case coming.
They'll be making more money than any of them.
Some of that may be mitigated just by the general growth of women's sports and coverage of it. Seeing how women's basketball, really at the college level first and now into the WNBA, is booming right now. And I think the same has happened in softball over the last decade. It's a great watch, the Women's College World Series, once they get to that far. It's such a fun product. And I know a ton of people that go to Georgia games, softball games, just have a great time. It's a faster product than what baseball is. and usually a little bit more energized. Like they're kind of different, even though they're a similar sport. The energy around it can feel a lot different. I think the energy that you felt at Foley Field Dash the other day with Georgia Tech, that's a little bit more common with softball, only because the players are into it the whole time, even if the fans aren't.
Yeah, there's a lot of chanting that goes on over there.
Yeah.
I'm with it. Speaking of chanting, I want you to chant Academia 3 times, because let's go Academia. They are fantastic folks out there. They have some new beverages that you need to check out. West side of Athens, right off of Atlanta Highway. They have the Boozy Botanist. Now, this is a drink right up Anthony Dasher's alley. Perfect combination of gin, vodka, grapefruit juice, lemon juice, mint, and simple syrup. So if you want the Boozy Botanist, they have those over there. They look great. I might have 4 or 5 of those. And of course, they have their classic beer, the Alma. Great beers out at Academia Brewing Company. You need to try them out. Of course, great food. They also have a new beer that you might like if you want a bourbon barrel-aged beer. It's called Give Me All the Bacon. So if you are a Ron Burgundy fan, you're like, not Ron Burgundy, what's the guy's name?
Oh, you're talking about from Parks and Rec, aren't you?
Parks and Rec, yeah.
Ron Swanson.
Yeah, Ron Swanson. Give me all the bacon, says Ron Swanson. Come try our newest beer on tap, a bourbon barrel-aged maple bacon coffee imperial stout. This just looks amazing. Perfect beer to pair up with any of their brunch items. So check out the Ron Swanson. Give me all the bacon bourbon barrel-aged beer. You got to try that out. Fun stuff going on at Academia Brewing Company. If you don't have your own business like the folks at Academic Brewing Company do, reach out to our friends at myperfectfranchise.net. They can take care of you. They can say, look, what do you want to do? How much time do you have? What are your goals? What would you like to get out of this? Answer a few questions, and they can start guiding you towards the perfect franchise for you. They have over 3,000 different options. You can't go wrong with it. If you're not cut out for it, then they'll find that out early on. You won't make a very expensive mistake. If you're just unsure of how to go about it, what to do, reach out to Andy Ludecki. He's the guy that runs myperfectfranchise.net. He's helped a ton of our readers, a ton of Rivals readers, not just at UGA Sports, but all over the network, start their own businesses. That's what he does all day, every day. He helps people own their own businesses, own their own franchises. He pairs them up. He knows what's hot. He knows what's recession proof. He knows what's taking off and what's dying out. You won't get a franchise that's, 4 years from now, nobody's using it anymore. So reach out to Andy Ludecki at myperfectfranchise.net. The call is free. Contact him is free. Hell, everything that you do with him is free. So what have you got to lose? Hit him up when you get a chance.
One interesting note that relates to all of this where college football is going is in the TV media rights. And I wanted to make sure that we touched on ESPN has the full rights to the college football playoff. It is the media partner for that. So that's ESPN, ABC, so that whole enterprise. They sold off one of the first round games to TNT, which means there is a possibility in the next couple of years, a Georgia football game, if they're in the first round of the playoffs, could be on TNT, which to my knowledge has not had college football in a very long time. And this is related in some ways to the NBA contract that it looks like TNT will be losing, Turner Sports losing, Warner Media losing. And then that is going to be picked up by some combination of Amazon and NBC, and ESPN will still have basketball as well. So you're seeing, and we've been teasing this for years, I think all of us have, you're seeing YouTube, you're seeing Amazon, Netflix is getting some NFL games now. These streaming only partners are happening more and more and more. And so what that means for college football is anytime those rights come up, there's just going to be more money to be made. But it seemed like that Turner, Warner Media with TNT, was pulling back money that it would have spent on the NBA package, and is using that to buy one college football game. So I just thought that was interesting how that's shaking out.
What is hotter than college football?
NFL's it, but football as a whole just seems to be skyrocketing in this country without an end.
And I remember there were people who were saying they weren't going to watch. There was some political protests going on, and a lot of people said, "I'm not going to watch professional football anymore." The rankings have rebounded from because they did dip. There's no question about it. but they've come back. I think COVID really turned a lot of people towards sports because it was such a great escape. It was one of the few things that was still going on, even with its limitations. And a lot of people got into sports they hadn't seen as much. Just like Audible. There's a lot more people on Audible now after COVID than ever have been before. They're listening to books, because they got into it then. A lot more people baking. I get it. It was kind of a fundamental change, but my point is right now, if you look at the trajectory of college football, it was getting a little stale there. And even with the NIL, people complaining about that, even with the transfer portal, people complaining about that. Some people were complaining that Georgia won titles back-to-back, and it's only the same teams winning. But now that you've got the playoffs coming, you see how big the NCAA basketball tournament is with all its teams. Now that you're going to have 12 teams who are still in it, TNT is smart to say, look, playoff basketball is huge. NBA is huge. And it also suffered that same dip and is rocketed right back to the top. The characters, the storylines, the athletes, same in football, basketball, baseball seeing a resurgence. People getting into sports all over the place. If you're losing one, it can kill your network. If you're jumping on another one that's skyrocketing in popularity as well, it's smart. It's money well spent. Absolutely.
I look at it this way too. If TNT is interested in college football, and I think a lot of media partners are, I don't see 12 teams as the playoff being the case for very long. They can say whatever they want to. They didn't stick with 4 for very long. But if there's going to be more games they can sell off, I know everyone's going to say it waters down the regular season, and you're not wrong if you say that. That's been the case with basketball at every level for a long time. They just have to make it to the tournament. And this will expand more, I think, over the next decade.
Dash, how long ago did you tell me that when they first mentioned playoffs, you said it would be 16 teams? Was that 2 years ago? 3 years ago?
Can't remember how long it's been, but 1AA had been doing 16 teams for years.
Yeah, I mean, you called it.
Yeah,
it was first mentioned. I just want to give you credit for that.
Didn't know it'd be 12. Didn't know what number it'd be, but I think you could see it expanding a long time ago. No question about that.
I like this one. We get Ernie Johnson to the studio for a Dogs game.
That would be fun. And Ernie, even because they've talked about with Inside the NBA, it's the most popular studio show of all time. I guess College Game Day is right there with it. Would it go to some other network with NBA coverage? And from everything, it sounds like Ernie Johnson is a Turner sports lifer, and he will wrap up his career with Warner Media. And he lives in Brazelton, works in Atlanta. I don't think he would want to disrupt any of that.
Oh, they talk college football all the time. With him and Chuck and going back and forth about Auburn and Georgia, and then Shaq talking LSU. I'd watch their pregame before a SEC Saturday.
Yeah, ESPN should just hire them to do college football instead. Barkley too.
Yeah, I think that would be phenomenal.
Quick Ernie Johnson story. Actually, a story about his dad, real quick. Back when I used to help cover the Braves a couple decades ago, Ernie Sr. wasn't broadcasting that day, so he sat up in the press box. He actually sat by me for the duration of a game, and just to kind of chat with him while the game was coming on was a pretty cool moment. I'll never forget.
That's super cool. Ernie Johnson Jr., I get to see him once every year or two. He'll come through Grady College because he's super supportive of Grady and always supportive of UGA. He flies that flag proudly, and he is one of those people. However nice and genuine as you think he is, it's more than that. I mean, he lives up to the billing so much. So he's one of the best ones out there.
Let's answer a couple questions here, and then we'll wrap up with that. Eddie from Ackworth, who has a good show on this channel on Sundays. You need to check it out. Says, do you guys foresee salary caps or more important salary floors? Guys.
I don't know if you're going to see a salary floor. I mean, because it's all going to be dependent on the player and what a school team feels his worth is. So I don't know if you'll see some kind of just it's going to be a low payment, for the players will have to receive. I think it will just depend on the individual.
See, I kind of see it the opposite way, where it's like, okay, if you're a football player or a baseball player, you're going to get X amount of dollars. And it could be pretty. Yeah, I mean, it's if the player's coming to your school and he knows that you're spending $20 million, not going to expect the whole thing, but he's at least going to expect a certain amount. So And right now, Georgia, basically every football player at the University of Georgia is making something. And
Sure.
Georgia was the first to get them there. Now, they weren't making those crazy numbers that you're seeing at some of the other schools, but they were all, to a person getting something. So that was big. The salary cap thing, definitely see it, a salary cap from the universities in saying, look, we're not paying anybody exorbitant money. But that still doesn't preclude other outside interests from doing NIL unless the school has all their rights. And I don't know that how many kids are going to come in and sign over those rights. I could see it, that being the MO going forward, school saying, look, we own your rights, you stick with us, we're going to pay you X. But the school paying these kids is not going to preclude boosters from enticing them to come. That's never, ever going to go away.
I'll broaden the question because I think it's really more, does college football go more of the American professional sports model, which does have the salary caps? And if you go above that, there's a luxury tax that the organization would have to pay to some entity. And I just don't think that it's organized enough for that. So I think it's going to be more, I mentioned international soccer. I think it's more of that route where you get paid whatever the market dictates you'll get paid. And so that may mean very little at the bottom end, but if you're a Carson Beck coming back for a season when you could have been an NFL player, it's probably a lot of money, and it already is. But, I mean, it would be more.
Yeah. He followed that up with a question, but what about the players unionizing? We've already seen that happen.
I've already seen that happen and start. So, yeah, I definitely could see that going down.
And to his point, I think that you need that. I think you need a players association.
You don't have to have it.
You can have your guys go in and do their individual negotiations, but that's where you're going to get that, hey, we need a base salary, to cover expenses, to do this, such and so forth. But I think the people who say, oh, I don't want to see that, I don't see the players do that. Some of these presidents and people are like, look, we don't want to do 85 separate deals. Or 535, however many total number of athletes you have on one place. We're like, look, you guys get together and we'll come up with something as a whole. You can't keep piecemealing it, which is the problem with the NIL right now and the transfer portal. Just, coaches are having to address each one individually, and it just wears them out.
Here's a question from Bulldog Ben over at UGASports.com. How much separation will there be between Georgia's top rusher and other players? Do you think Trevor Etienne gets the majority of carries, or will it be more like committee in recent years?
Good question, Dash.
I think you'll see Trevor get most of the yards. That's not saying that you won't see Roderick Robinson or whoever else wind up getting 100 or so totes a game. But I think they brought Trevor in for a reason. I know historically, recent years anyway, you've seen more guys get chances. If Trevor can stay healthy, I see him getting a lot of the carries for Georgia this year. Although again, I don't think it'll be a situation where he'll just play the entire game until Georgia gets a big lead. They'll still rotate guys in and out. But I just think once you look at the stats at the end of the year, you'll see Trevor Etienne with a pretty sizable chunk of yards.
Intel that we got yesterday from Georgia's voluntary workouts was that Branson Robinson looks really good catching passes out of the backfield, something I was not expecting. Yeah, I know he can catch, but, I mean, is he a DeAndre Swift? Is he a James Cook? And I don't think people have used him in the same breadth as those guys who just had soft he's got – you don't think of him as having such soft hands as some of the current, recent Georgia running backs, but he's working on it. We saw the video of him working out. He's not quite as stiff as a lot of people thought he was. He's really busting it. Nate Frazier is going to be a superstar. Chancey Bowens.
Love Nick, yeah.
Chauncey, he's a killer. Georgia's bringing in some great backs. Branson Robinson could be everything once he's healthy. But again, from folks inside the program said, we don't have a back like Trevor is. We haven't had one like him for a while. I'm like, wait a minute, you got a bunch of backs that have been drafted. They're like, he's really special. So you have a new running backs coach. If the question was asked last year, would he be, far and away your number one back? We'd be like, no, because they've had guys who could be premier backs, and Dale McGee still spread it around to keep everybody happy. I don't know what Josh Crawford's theory is. I don't know what his plan of attack is, but there is a big jump between Trevor Etienne and everybody else, and you got a new coach who's, he's got to impress Kirby Smart. So maybe he doesn't rotate as much, or maybe he does. I don't know. Completely unknown question, but it'll be interesting, especially that first game against Clemson. See who's healthy, who's ready to go, and what is
who can play,
and
who can play. We still don't know about Trevor as far as his little incident over the summer.
Yeah.
He may not. I mean, if
Trevor
you go strictly by a UGA athletic book, he's not going to be able to play. But we'll see. That's kind of been tweaked a little bit since Coach Smart has been the coach. So I'm not going to sit here and say for sure he's not, but that's something you'll have to consider.
That was something they changed a few years ago in the student athlete handbook. It was basically they gave the athletic director and a committee power to change the rules, if you will, to override them, saying basically if there's mitigating circumstances, then they can say, look, yes, here's what the thing requires, but here's how the case played out, and here's what's happened in the interim. We don't have to go by it. It's not as cut and dry as it used to be.
Yeah, and have kids respond to the punishment too. It plays a huge role in that. And from everything I've heard, I mean, Trevor has done every single thing that Coach Smart required him to do. So that'll probably play.
Well, everybody over there was stunned because he's never done anything like that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
How dare both of you have a running backs conversation and omit Cash Jones? I'm floored. You wait.
He got the perfect name for the NIL era, doesn't he? And Cash,
right. Georgia's going to get this big lead, and Cash is going to be running wild. Y'all wait.
He can now just run with have the dollar sign on his back, just for
Yeah, he'll have a symbol for his name from evermore.
Oh, get one of those big neck rolls.
Oh,
the neck roll with
multiple
the
dollar sign.
Not the old fullbacks used to have.
Exactly. He gets one of those and puts the dollar sign on the back.
We're the marketing team for Cash Jones at this point.
Mm-hmm.
We're coming up with all the ideas for him.
Last thing I'll say before we sign off here was Dash, you're talking about the roster changing and basically the thought of getting rid of walk-ons and only being limited to 85. Can you imagine if you couldn't get Stetson Bennett as a walk-on?
Yeah.
So do not screw with my walk-ons. I don't care what you got to do. You got to drop a sport. Don't let me lose my college football walk-ons there.
Going way back, Richard Tardit says hello too.
Oh my God! Wow.
Hey Dash, before we get out of here, give a plug for what fans can expect both from our site with this weekend for Georgia baseball, but then also if they're coming up to Athens with or without a ticket, just what they're going to be walking into.
Well, first of all, on tickets, they did announce that tickets are left will go on sale tomorrow at 9:00. You can either go up to the Bus Mill building or click on Georgia Dogs and try to access tickets that way. But from what I understand, those things are going to be in very, very short supply. It's going to be a nutty atmosphere, I think, at Foley Field this week. But as far as what UGA Sports going on baseball, still kind of formalizing that, but I can promise you it's going to be the most coverage you're going to find anywhere else on Georgia baseball. It's been that way the entire season, and I don't plan on having that slow down anytime soon. And looking forward to the series too. Actually, going to have some expanded covers there. Jed May's going to help me cover that. Kate Skeen's going to be out there shooting as well as Lance McCurley. So we'll have this thing covered from third base to first base, outfield, home plate. We're going to have it all for you.
You're right, Roddy. It's been covered that way for generations, not a season.
Well, people don't understand when you are getting spring football coverage from Anthony Dasher, how many of those stories are written in the baseball press box. Just
writing 2 stories at one time.
Inches and inches and inches and inches of story. So he does both at the same time. It's mind blowing. I mean, I can't walk and chew gum and Anthony Dasher doing baseball updates and spring roster updates for football. It's nuts. All right, folks, that's all the time we have for this week's show. We really appreciate you all tuning in. Shout out to Coach Don and hope he's feeling better soon. We know he will be. He's too tough, too strong. And thanks for Anthony Dasher for stepping in, giving us some great baseball insights and his reporting from SEC Media Days. He did a great job down there. And be sure to tune in this Saturday at noon. Georgia hosts NC State for a chance to go to the College Baseball World Series. We will see you next week.